As Israel wraps up the fall biblical holidays and heads into its fourth week of lockdown, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu wants the strict closure to continue. That means all non-essential shops and businesses, as well as most schools, are closed. Israelis are confined to an area within about a half-mile from their homes, with some exceptions. It also means a mandatory 2-week quarantine for anyone flying into the country. Joining us now from what Israelis call bidud, that's quarantine in Hebrew, is our very own CBN Middle East Bureau Chief, Chris Mitchell. Chris, welcome to Jerusalem Dateline and welcome back.
Julie, it's great to be back on Jerusalem Dateline. Great to be back in Israel. As you know, I was in the States for several weeks, ended with a time at the return just about a week, actually 2 weeks ago, when there was this large gathering of Christians to repent on behalf of America. But here I am back in Israel, and as you say, in bidud.
So tell us, Chris, you've been working from home, but what does it mean to be in bidud? Are they checking up on you? Are they making sure you're staying inside?
Well, they are, Julie. In fact, last Sunday, I got a friendly call from the Ministry of Interior, and they asked me if I was home, and I said yes. And then they asked me if I had a balcony or a window. So they asked me to come to the window and to wave to them. They'd actually pulled up right outside my apartment building, and there I was. I waved to them. They said thank you, and then they went on their way. So that's just one way that Israel is checking up on people that are required to quarantine for 14 days. I would add, Julie, it's an unusual experience. It's a little bit like solitary confinement. However, I have this nice apartment I can stay in. But the odd thing is that you really can't even leave your front door. So I'm at the mercy of people like those in the Bureau that are providing me food and things like that. But a very surreal experience, a lot like 2020, not only here in Israel, but around the world.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've covered this story about Armenia and Azerbaijan this week. You've covered a lot of stories about the Middle East, about atrocities and persecution of Christians. Is this situation the same thing?
Well, Julie, this is where I would compare it to. What happened almost 1 year ago was when Turkey invaded northeast Syria. They had claimed that part of the Kurdish population there represented a threat to Turkey. That seemed like a frivolous excuse. It really seemed to be a pretext for Turkish President Recep Erdogan to expand part of his borders. And I see the same thing happening here. He's allying with Azerbaijan. He seems to be providing them with air support, with military advisors, even troops on the ground. Even French President Macron has said that he is supplying Azerbaijan with Syrian jihadist terrorists. It's the same thing he did last year against the Kurdish population and those in northeast Syria. He supplied Syrian jihadists to be sort of like his frontline troops. And that's what I see happening right now. The Turkish president is trying to expand not only around his own borders, he's trying to expand to Libya. He's actually having a confrontation now with Greece. He's had one with Iraq and now with Armenia. And for many of the Armenians, they see this as almost a continuation of this 1915 genocide against the Armenians that we referred to in our report earlier in the program.
Wow.
It seems like it's Turkish President Recep Erdogan is really the sort of the mover behind this current conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
Yeah, that's we need to remember to continue to pray for them.
That's right.
It's a hard situation. Yeah, and on a more positive note, we continue to see good fruit from the Israeli, UAE, Bahrain deals. Jordan and Israel signed an aviation agreement this week. What else is going on?
Well, right now we see that Lebanon and in Israel are actually having negotiations, third-party negotiations, but the first time in decades. And it may be symbolic, but I think it's really telling, Julie, that here on the Feast of Tabernacles, probably for the first time ever, a sukkah or booth was built in Dubai. And who would have expected this about a year ago? But 2020 has a lot of surprises. We're also seeing more trade, potential trade between the UAE, Bahrain, and Israel. And we expect more nations around this region are going to be normalizing relations with Israel. Some of the good news happening and sometimes a region where there's a lot of bad news.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to having you back in the office sometime next week. And be well. Thank you. Blessings for Shabbat.
Alpha Omega.